Okay, perfect. I think well, people are still logging in, but they're just going to have to join us when we do start. So, thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Dean McEwen. I'm the director of the AI Analytics and Finance Suite at Smith School of Business. Thanks a lot for joining us to talk about this most intriguing world of artificial intelligence that we've got. Um, just recently, right, DeepSeek, which is a Chinese startup company, released their R1 model, which is a very advanced AI model capable of handling more complex questions and problems than typical chatbots have. Remarkably, DeepSeek developed their R1 with just $5.6 million American dollars and fewer computer chips compared to American AI giants like Anthropic, OpenAI. Now, the R1 model is open source, which is also intriguing. It makes its underlying code freely available, unlike OpenAI's ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude. So this development has raised many concerns in the US about losing its dominance in the AI industry, particularly when it just announced this about 3 or 4 days after the American government announced their Stargate initiative for $500 billion. Um, and it's a direct sort of response, I think, to again the American decision not to export their advanced chips to China. And so, they're calling it, or Mark Anderson from who created Mosaic and the initial browsers and stuff called it the AI's Sputnik moment, right? An awakening for not only America, but for a lot of countries and about the development of artificial intelligence and the impact it's actually going to have. So there's been a couple other interesting things too about DeepSeek. So after it was launched publicly, it did undergo a cyber attack. During that cyber attack, as people started digging into it a little bit more and started looking at the open source code, right, there's some interesting things about it that basically says, it adheres to China's censorship laws and avoids topics like Tiananmen Square and the Umbrella Revolution. And there's some question too about the use of Chinese servers every time you use R1. So it's an extremely fascinating topic, and I'm really excited to introduce my panel to discuss DeepSeek and the impact that their R1 model is going to have on AI development and perhaps even this idea of global politics as well. So I'm joined today by an amazing panel of Queen's University graduates, Dr. Atif Farid Mohammed from the Queen's School of Computing. We've got Robin Foster from our Master of Management Analytics program. Francis Silva, who's also from our MMA program, and Nimish Shah from our MBA program. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today and talking about DeepSeek a little bit. So let's start with Dr. Atif. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, why is DeepSeek having such a dramatic impact on not only ChatGPT, but the AI industry in general?
So in reality, anything that is open source, first of all, thank you so much, all of my peers here, and thank you, Dean. I hope I'm quite audible.
Yeah, good.
So the idea of open source always dominates closed source because closed source has agendas, has their visions, has their directions, which they follow. Whereas open source by itself is available for anyone, XYZ, ABC, even me, you, where we can alter and bring in our own ideas and embed in terms of simple Python terms. We define our own functions and use the available routines, functionalities, methodologies, and all that jazz. On the back end, when we discuss at the hardware and all that jazz, that comes handy. However, that's not that significant because we are, as a community, open source community, we are using the limited resources. So what exactly happened in DeepSeek's sake? The large language model is not yesterday or day before yesterday's thing. I was attached with the Open AI community in 2018 when I was teaching the natural language processing at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And we created a whole sequence of indexing on top of Hadoop clusters, which was pretty neat at that time. The big data and Hadoop and MapReduce, which was initiated by Google in reality, and then Cloudera and all those players came in. So the natural language processing, natural language understanding, natural language generation was automatically the next step. That's how DeepSeek is able to produce what they are able to produce in place of the OpenAI, Mistral, Claude, Gemini, and all that. Even though Gemini could be pretty decent, however, the quantization techniques that they use in DeepSeek are very, very solid. And I have conducted a research. It is going to be published, I think, by the August or September. So you're open to look into that. Hopefully, this satisfies a little bit of your question. Back to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Actually, we got a question from the audience already. Aaron Watson wanted to know, is DeepSeek truly open source when they don't disclose their complete training data?
Yes, it's absolutely open source in terms of the algorithms. Training data can be created. You can pick any fictional novels at Gutenberg Library, and you can use that for any given purposes. You don't need the closed source data from Microsoft or from Google or from OpenAI. They all have trained natural language understanding in a similar fashion. So yes, that can be trained without any priority, the proprietary material.
Okay, perfect. Good stuff. Let's go over to Robin and talk more about the business side of, what has actually happened here. Um, do you think that these restrictions imposed on chip suppliers and, like who and what they can sell to Chinese company, has it actually forced, the Chinese companies to innovate? And do you think this is going to have a bigger impact on let's call the AI race that's going on around the world right now?
Yeah, so yes to all. From a business perspective, I'll kind of go top down. It's completely changed the AI race. It has put China on the map. It has disrupted most of North America. Look at NVIDIA, their stock dropped, I think it was about 17% in a day. Essentially, what they manufacture, their chips, powerful chips for AI, have been banned from China. That was, I think, 2019. And there's a concept that constraint breeds innovation, or it pushes innovation. So, the US thought that they would impose these restrictions. Maybe it lasted for a little while. They wanted to essentially halt China, slow them down. And instead, they figured out how to do it with less. So now you look at all of the North American players, no doubt they are scrambling, going, holy crap, now how do we adjust? How do we create models that will similarly run on much less hardware and cost much less? Similar to NVIDIA, they're going to most likely figure out how they can produce different chips. Maybe not. Time will tell whether the demand for these powerful chips will go down. I don't see how it can't, but I cannot usually predict the future. The general business landscape, I think that this is probably just as disruptive as when ChatGPT came out. At the time, the average business was scrambling. What do we do? Came as a bit of a surprise. People didn't really necessarily have any way of assessing the risk. They didn't know what it meant to their organizations. They didn't really understand where their data was going or what that meant for training. We're seeing that all again. This time, most organizations likely have a way of assessing it. I would assume that most organizations have likely said, halt, do not use this. You are not allowed to use this for business purposes. Little bit different with OpenAI, little bit different between OpenAI and DeepSeek. DeepSeek data is going to, Chinese servers. Their terms of service are much wider. So I would assume that, similar to ChatGPT, most organizations will allow it at some point, but in a very different controlled environment, maybe when they're running their own instances or they're running it through other software that keeps their data in-house. So yep, mass disruption again. New AI race. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, for sure. And I remember when when ChatGPT first came out, and of course, a lot of business people were putting in financial statements and stuff, right, to say, hey, make me a PowerPoint presentation. And of course, all that financial data ended up into ChatGPT and could potentially become accessible to other organizations. So I think that that's a huge, huge lesson learned, I think, for a lot of people 2 years ago. But then jump forward to today when all of a sudden, there have been some reports lately about DeepSeek, and one of the first calls it makes is going back to Chinese servers about what kind of information you're putting into it. So it does create this question, right? What are you putting in there? What's it doing with that information? And what's going to happen coming out of it? Now, I'm going to jump over to Francis, something a little bit more sort of what's specific about this, but what does this breakthrough, in technology like DeepSeek mean for specifically marketers and the customer-facing applications that we see out there?
Thanks, Dean. Good question. I think, in our space today, I work with a lot of clients who serve other customers. I think right now what we're seeing is it's probably threefold. The first is around edge computing. So because as many of you have heard, obviously training of DeepSeek was done with less data data points, right? Data examples, but also less compute power. But the inference side is also really interesting, where it actually then generates its output. And so people are showing that smaller versions of DeepSeek can be used on edge devices. So think of a mobile device, or for example, in-store computing. So what does that mean? That really means, this holy grail in marketing about contextualized personalization at the edge, this idea that you can generate content on the fly. So if you're standing in a store today and you go to your offers, you can generate a set of offers, so you don't need to pre-create that. So that's an area that we've been working on with some clients. I think the other place is the in-store experiences. So I think everyone, obviously, with a lot of these large language models and the ability to generate different experiences or different types of communications to customers, there's also things like intelligent mirrors, as well as other types of in-store devices that you can now project different types of content on as well. And then the other use case that I think is interesting that models like DeepSeek open up for us are things like even adaptive pricing. We're in the loyalty space, and in loyalty, we always talk about the holy grail being the ability to dynamically price something either through points or through discounts for your customers, right? You will ultimately want the customer to pay the maximum they were willing to pay, and you use that through a set of different levers. And then we think models like DeepSeek, or the ability to do inference at the edge, allows you to, create a unique discount just for you at checkout for that item that you just put back onto the shelf. Because you're like, you know what, today I really wanted this, but I think it's too expensive. We think that use cases like that start to open up. So those are the specific, customer-facing use cases. And then obviously, as you think about leveraging some of the learnings from it, where I think we're going to get into things like synthetic data, as well as open source. I know ads have talked on open source as well. We think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities now for folks in marketing.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Francis. So, when you talk about this incremental change, right, and what's happening, so I was trying to think of like a comparison piece. And when I was a kid, one of my favorite things in the world was a Ferrari Testarossa. And so I don't know if anybody remembers those old cars, but because they're old now, but they were hot then. But that car had 400 horsepower. And I just remember thinking that was phenomenal. Well, jump up to today, right? And we can buy a Kia Stinger with 400 horsepower. And so I always think that this is the same thing with these large language models, is that sure, we had these like super hot sports cars that could do this stuff that cost, $2 million. But then jump today and you can get, similar performance and stuff for, 50, 60, 70 grand. So I think that that's a pretty good comparison of what's going on here. And so I'm going to turn to Nimesh and ask about this. So do you think, the DeepSeek has sort of created a pathway towards, better LLMs and maybe even more open source LLMs? And is that changing the landscape from these closed ones from ChatGPT and Claude and stuff?
So the short answer is definitely yes, right? I think Dr. Atif spoke about where it's coming from a little bit, but here's like a meta thought as to why DeepSeek is performing better than the others. It uses the reinforcement learning A and the chain of thought process, which is making it better at answering situations that require like mathematical reasoning. Historically, if you would go to a model and ask it a question like, okay, I have 4 boxes, different shaped sizes, arrange it. It wouldn't be able to do that because the neural network is placed in such a way that it would have to hit different points and then come up with an answer. Now, the chain of thought process, what it does is that it is having a conversation with the LLM itself. Hey, okay, what am I seeing on the screen right now? How do I arrange it? What is the color of it? Okay, does this actually make sense of putting it back? So it literally reasons out like a human mind as to what should the next logical step be. And I think that is the differentiating or the competitive advantage that DeepSeek initially bought, which was only available to ChatGPT's OpenAI's O3 Mini, I believe. And now that it is available to everyone, that means if anyone is training even a Llama model, they can use this chain of thought method to make their models better, make their models smaller, and inherently challenge the vision that bigger is better, not anymore. Because now you could teach it some very specific things to do and how to do it in a certain way, and it is able to have a conversation with itself. So I think that was a very long way to answer the question that you actually posed, and that was, will it become better for training purposes? And the answer is yes.
So just to add to Nimesh, if you put Siri speaking with Alexa, speaking with Google Home, the training starts as soon as the 3 agents start speaking. So in reality, when we got the voice to text and text to voice enabled in Dragon at MIT, that was the beginning of the foundational models. So when DeepSeek 2 or 3 agents are talking to each other, in terms of reasoning, that's in reality, there are 3 different instances running on the back end, and that can run in parallel. That's why parallelism exists. Back to you, Dean.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So let's, I'm just looking at my questions and stuff here. So back over to Robin. As far as, privacy and security, right? Is it realistic that a business can actually use DeepSeek right now? Or even, like we mentioned before, even ChatGPT and stuff without actual authorization? Or is this just going way beyond the privacy and security expectations of most organizations?
No, a lot of organizations are using this. It's embedded in a lot of other application software, whatnot. That's, we'll say, the safe way to do it. In most cases, the exposure to organizations is where their employees have downloaded the application and are feeding the proprietary data or anything about the company in. And essentially that would get around all of the controls that the organization has in place, and feeding data to Chinese servers, which is, I would say, well within policy in some organizations, but well, not in policy for many organizations. And it goes against, GDPR, PIPA, you name it. So yeah, businesses are using it. There's employees that are probably using it in a very dangerous way. The privacy and security concerns to me are really about us as individuals. I'm not downloading it. No, thank you. I can look around and say, well, yeah, I'm tracked and my data is here and my data is there. But this is just so explicitly saying, you know, we're taking all of this, we're bringing this to China. It is, you know, accessible. It is owned by, you know, the Chinese government. So at this point, it doesn't really feel very good to me. It might down the road, but if an organization is saying, you know, we can take what we get here and we can combine it with what's over here and we can snoop around and get more, I can only imagine what they're actually doing, because you know, a lot of organizations, whether it be these models or just, you know, consumer products, are taking a lot of our data and using it. But China is a communist country, and they have specific laws, and they have, you know, specific things that go against what a lot of other governments stand for. Canadian government's banned it. Italy's banned it. Australia's banned it. I don't have a list of organizations that have banned it, but I'm pretty confident that it's huge. I wouldn't be letting anybody within my organization use this.
So in reality, Dean, what Robin just has said, I am the Chief Information Security Officer also. My first PhD is in cybersecurity. So the management of privacy concerns certainly exist. All those GDPR, CCPA, you know, the standard HIPAA compliance in the United States in specific, and the PHI, PII maintenance that we do all around in US and Canada also in specific. We need to be mindful when we are working with these things until and unless it is fully downloaded on someone's desktop or a device. I would strongly suggest not to touch it. We do have Gemini, which is pretty competitive. DeepSeek has opted for quantization at a level which is very nice. We can learn from it, and we can redo some foundational models of our own. And on top of those of our own done foundational models, we can incorporate those with Gemini, with ChatGPT, even with Mistral, which is French, with Claude, which is French. So the Europe is pretty neatly coming into this wild, wild west, I call it, of the artificial intelligence in terms of generative AI. So back to you. Thank you. Robin?
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, Robin. Over to Francis. So, okay, let's take all this into consideration here about these what we'll call open source models, like DeepSeek, but not necessarily DeepSeek. What kind of implications, Francis, is this going to have on enterprise-wide AI strategies?
It's a great question, Dean. So we've been talking to a lot of clients about specifically their AI strategy. Now, as others have mentioned, open source versus closed source is still a big discussion. Obviously, when I see some questions in the chat about this, but when you do go open source and you decide to deploy models on your own, let's say, infrastructure in your own private cloud, be it AWS or through Azure or GCP, you've got to also have the resources and the engineering resources to maintain and monitor all of that. When you're using something proprietary, as for example, ChatGPT, or even let's say with Microsoft and using Copilot, all of the wrapping around it in the front end is taken care of. And so now, like, I think especially as you see something like DeepSeek come into the market, and just generally what we've been talking about is this idea that in order to compete in a world where, you know, a lot of people talk about the marginal cost of intelligence dropping down closer to zero. The idea is that in order for you to compete, you probably need proprietary data assets, right? So you probably need some ground truths about, and so in our space, it would be customers, right? What do you know about the customer that's different from your competitors? Therefore, if you both have the same intelligence, how can you use that to then create an experience that's unique for that customer to your brand? As well as domain expertise, understanding that space really well so that you can use these tools, whether it's DeepSeek or whether it's any other intelligence product, into your workflow, right? I think a lot of organizations right now are still challenged with finding commercial viability at scale for intelligence into their workflows. And I think that's because this truly is enterprise transformation, and enterprise transformation requires deep domain expertise. I think the other piece to this that did I lose you guys? Oh, sorry.
We lost, no, you're back.
Oh, I'm back. Yeah, and I think the other piece to this really quickly is scaling and efficiency, right? I think one of the, Sam Altman talks about this, is that you can build two types of companies right now. You can build a company based on the idea that the models are as smart as they're going to be, and so you're going to build your company and your product around the current level of intelligence, or you build your company with the idea that the intelligence will continue to get better, and therefore as the intelligence gets better, your product and offering gets better, right? And I think for a lot of organizations now, I think seeing how quickly things are moving, we recommend building processes and products that assume that intelligence is going to get much better, but also have the flexibility to use any type of intelligence out there. So you don't want to lock yourself into one type of model or one type of capability.
Okay, very interesting. So going over to Nimesh with this question. So we talked at the very top about NVIDIA and the stocks falling and all that kind of stuff. I know crystal ball kind of event here. Do you think this is going to continue happening with these kinds of chips, or how do you see the future around that a little bit?
Okay. Taking a step back from technology, right? If you look at NVIDIA's history in the last 1.5, 2 years, whatever it is, it's been a straight line up, right? And people are finding reasons to say that, okay, this is the point where I'm going to sell. And I think that investors who don't fully comprehend where AI is going have taken a decision that this is the DeepSeek movement, and I think it's going to affect NVIDIA's stock price. But in reality, it has gone the opposite direction. NVIDIA as a product has just become stronger, and I can even tell you very openly about it that AWS has increased its H100 pricing from what it was. They are almost out of H200 capacity already, which is required for, it is pretty good at inferencing, and that's what people want. So that means that NVIDIA's monopoly is not threatened yet. And the real threatening is actually to open source, closed source models like OpenAI, where they have not published how did they come to chain of thought, etc. And now it's publicly available to everyone. So they have, unlocked that monopoly, and they, kind of democratized as to how can you make the best models out there. So I don't think that NVIDIA's monopoly is threatened at all. In fact, just for some statistics, right? China's AI strategy is not even mature at this point in time. In the last 10 years, they have only been focused in semiconductors. You've already seen the announcements at Stargate, and at the top level, all the executives are meeting in the US. Xi Jinping has not even met the folks at DeepSeek at this point in time. So that shows you how serious China is at this point in time. Yes, there are laws that are prohibiting the transportation of chips from the US to China at this point in time. But if China wanted to, at any given point in time, they do have the horsepower and the talent to kind of become extremely competitive from where they are at this point in time. I'm using the word extremely because DeepSeek is competitive, but this is just like a starting point. So NVIDIA, till a manufacturer comes into a play, which is going to now tell that, okay, I'm going to do better parallel processing than what NVIDIA is doing, or I have a better product than CUDA available to people to, increase my iterations, etc. It's not going to be affected in the long term.
Can I jump in there, Dean?
Yeah.
I agree with most of the things Nimesh you're saying. I think the one caveat to this is I always try and break out training versus inference, right? So AMD obviously is a chip manufacturer as well, and they're very focused on inference, right? So their AMD Instinct chips would be an example where they're saying, hey, listen, like there's going to be more use cases for inference. All over the news right now, everyone's talking about Jevons paradox, right? The idea that as inference or as these models become more effective, more people are using them. Therefore, there's more demand for specifically inference, right? And I think that there's like NVIDIA has a lockout on training, obviously, as you kind of mentioned, but I think that there's going to be other chips where it's either built for purpose or they're customized for those specific applications. So if you think today about, specifically FPGAs, right? Chips that can be configured, or ASICs chips that are built for a specific purpose, like managing your toaster, right? I think that there could be opportunities for organizations to come and capture that, right? Like NVIDIA is probably not going to build an AI chip for your toaster, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that is definitely a point. Uh, I think also the fact that NVIDIA is still not knee deep into quantum computing, right? So there is an opportunity present for others, but in today's landscape, just with the models, that trajectory of the stock growth is something that I think it's still very bullish.
In reality, AMD, Qualcomm, and Intel, even though we say that Intel is losing the game, their R&D is the most mature, and the day they will bring out their chips against AMD and NVIDIA, there will be a little bit, trajectory come into balance. Also, the Alibaba and Baidu are not far behind, by the way, just FYI. We are conducting research. I had a classmate at Queens who's from China. I'm still in touch. He went back and did his PhD, went into the chip making at Alibaba. They are doing quite neat things. We just need to be mindful that if we are using the lower, like 5 years old, 6 years old chips, that's not bad at all. Means I still like a vintage car of 1956 or whatever it was. And then that's carburetor. Nobody builds that. We have to maintain it. So even if we have the parallel processing available using the strongest TPUs, every organization in the world, except Microsoft, Google's, and all those big, have very limited data. And they can create that synthetic data internally using their current chips, whatever they are available. They can write their own open source. It's very simple. It's simple mathematics, cosine similarity. What could be the possible next thing? I eat what? Food, mango, or apple. So that all is available. So it depends on the chips manufacturing. I agree with Nimish and Francis that they are doing whatever they are doing at a good level. However, we should be open to other players in the game as well. Back to you, Dean. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm actually going to jump out to a question from the audience. Anna wanted to know about the environment. I think this is a good time to bring that in because when we're talking about different chips, and there's always been lots of talk about the electricity use of data centers and that sort of thing. Does a success with an LLM, a more efficient LLM like DeepSeek, does that actually have a positive impact on the environment? And by positive, I mean using less resources to be able to do the same kind of work? And I'll open it up to everybody.
I'll jump in there just for a quick second. So I think it 100% is a great advancement. Will it have an impact? I'm not so sure. We reduce and then the demand goes up. So is it in the long run going to be of benefit? Well, I guess you can say yes, because if we didn't reduce that demand, then exponentially it would be a greater impact on the environment. But we're just at the very, very beginning of this. We talk about chips and where these companies are going, and where they are today is not where they're going to be down the road. I would hope that most organizations do have an eye on environment. Now that we have a different US administration in, who knows how that's going to work, but it's a positive step. As I said, I don't know what the long-term impact will be, if any.
So let me add this thing. When we process anything, let me go back 20 years. When we started working with the database management systems, I think that was where we started learning the scheduling, the batch processing, the computation time, and how long a chip would be needed or a processor would be needed to be hot, working, and extracting information out for us. That is applicable till today. The basics never change. And when we talk about reduced training time, it means we are using reduced energy spending on the clusters that we are working with. It enhances the efficiency because when we are ingesting data, that has nothing to do with the chips. When we are egressing for as an output or as an answer, that has nothing to do with the energy. Energy consumes when we start chunking the, algorithms on the back end, when the mathematics actually goes and starts working like horsepower you mentioned. It does not matter how much horsepower you have, 400 horses. You cannot go over 60 miles or whatever we have norm in Canada is, I think, 60 kilometers would be 40 miles in USA. Yeah, so you cannot go. It's not Autobahn. Autobahn has also a start and an end. Then you have to go on the prescribed speed limit. So it doesn't matter how much horsepower you have. So that's what my philosophy is when I'm working with these computational needs, to look at the better training in less time, reduced cost right there. And that makes sense. Back to you or anyone else. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I agree with what you just said there. I think, over the last couple of years, we've seen training time go down, right? Right now, the scaling law, or at least everyone believe that the scaling law was add more data in pre-training and just throw compute at it, right? And compute is just straight watts, right? And so when you hear Mark Zuckerberg talking about their next data center, he talks about it in terms of power, right? You're talking about like 100 megawatts or 500 megawatts. But we also forget that the best intelligence we know today is actually our brains, and that uses 20 watts, right? The same as like your Wi-Fi router or an LED light bulb, right? So I think that there's still a lot of advancement there. As we get more advanced, and every year we're getting more advanced. And I think the exciting part about all of this is that with the advent of this intelligence that lets us do more scientific discoveries at scale, you're already starting to see some breakthroughs in energy. Just the other day, there've been multiple breakthroughs in fusion as an example, right? So I think that this is going to force us to also invest in those areas of energy, be it clean energy or just more energy in general, which I think is ultimately a good thing.
So in 2023, we invited Greg Brockman at University of North Dakota. I happen to know him since 2013 when he was at, I think, the competitor of PayPal, which we are not using for some odd reason. But that's where I knew him. I invited him at one of the conference that he spoke in 2013 in San Francisco. And it happens to be that he went to the same school as my son went, in the Red River High School in Grand Forks, North Dakota. So we had a leverage. We brought him in. We had a closed door discussion with him and a couple of people who came with him. He was the previous president of OpenAI. And the discussion was that how to optimize algorithms. Simple, we have Robin with us, a round robin method, rather first come, first serve or last come, first serve. The best bet that came out was long short-term memory. I'm using a little bit technical. And there was a question that I just answered, what should we do? Learn mathematics from ground zero. You can't go without that. Everyone other than this panel is more likely a consumer of AI in some capacity. You need to be a person who can actually alter the algorithm by applying the conditional statements at a level where you think it's resolving your issue by bringing in more cosine similarities to predict what is a possible next word, not to go on tangent, to hallucinate, which is still pretty much a reality. So yeah, these are my 2 cents. Back to you, Dean. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts on that before I go to the next question? I have a great question from Michael in the audience. So he says, given all the concerns noted so far, any thoughts on why some large firms were so quick to broadcast their integration of DeepSeek? He's thinking along the lines of Perplexity and Microsoft, etc. And I'm going to put a second part to that. Do you think with big companies doing this, I guess the question is, are they doing it just to learn and discover it? Or are they actually going to be using it for their own productivity? And then third, do we expect any kind of regulations coming down to possibly shut this down? Let's go to Nimesh first.
Sure. So I can speak specifically about Perplexity. Perplexity gives you the ability to choose a bunch of models which are already there, right? So it is definitely in Perplexity's interest to provide DeepSeek to users, and they have their own data that they will eventually train it on, to give it that additional horsepower that is required. Uh, so Perplexity as a whole, their entire branding, if I had to put it under one ideology, it's that any model that's different, that's new, that is, even if it is just DeepSeek R2 tomorrow, for example, they will publish it to the users. So users can decide what to do with it themselves. Now, coming to the more nuanced fact about what are the answers that are published by DeepSeek, right? So I think this is a very politically driven question as to how does a country perceive itself. I will not go into too many nitty gritties about it, but having studied both in the Middle East and in Asia over a period of time, I have seen very different versions of the same history being shown in a different light. So I think every country should have the ability to tell its own citizens of what they believe is the right history from that lens. And I don't think that companies that are driving towards innovation would truly care about what that answer is being reproduced. Rather, what is the back end method of how that answer is being reproduced? An example, chain of thought method, right? That's a new technology out there. What does it give as an answer? They don't care about it. So I think that's how Perplexity looks at it, and I think that's why they were the first ones to jump on it. I think it was within 3 or 4 hours I saw my LinkedIn flooded with DeepSeek. In another 2 hours, Perplexity already has DeepSeek, and so on and so forth. But that's my view around it. I would open it up to the other panelists if they have a differentiated opinion, which could also educate me on how to actually think about this.
In reality, Microsoft jumps in with all these things, the thing that they call Copilot. Nothing against Copilot. However, you cannot force one spoon to everyone's mouth. That's the thing that comes to my mind instantaneously. It's not that I don't use Microsoft, or everybody uses Microsoft. And they have brought in last year AI PC, which was conducting all and everything at one machine without even touched by the internet or Wi-Fi. So that is available. In the USA, we had seen the demonstration. I was invited in that in Denver, Colorado, to look at that thing firsthand. I did the same thing on Colab and showed it them right there without even touching anything outside of Google. So they were saying, well, we have the Copilot. So yeah, Copilot is just a naming convention. It's more like Francis can put in when he is more of guru among us in the marketing area. So DeepSeek involvement in Microsoft, Perplexity, or you name it, Vectera is another big player, which is started by the Cloudera's founder, Dr. Amar Avalala, and they have written their own foundational models. I think those are worth looking at. They are just not publicizing or marketing that thing out. So these are my 2 cents. Back to whoever wants to take over from here. Thank you, Nimesh. It was very good to see someone else other than me, from the 4 different continents studying things.
Okay, good stuff. So just a quick reminder, we've got about 5 minutes left in the webinar. I do see someone with their hand up in the participation. If you have a question for us, please use the Q&A box. And I apologize if I didn't say that off to the top, but that's where we are. So here's another question from Sophia, and this is going to get on to the business and the people side of AI. So how does the wide availability of AI change the job market? And how is this going to affect technical developers like regular college and bachelor graduates? Not so much the PhD side of things and that real research. I think that's going to be nice and strong, but also business graduates alike. So how is AI going to have an impact on young people as they enter their careers? Any thoughts?
Maybe I can take a first stab at this because I feel out of the group, I'm the one who has graduated just like a 1.5 year ago and jumped into the sea of ocean where everyone's using AI. And as proponents of AI within my company, the first thing we have done is we've given the ability for developers to become better at first principle thinking, right? What this means is any developer that had to sit through lines of code and identify what went wrong, they will not have to do that anymore. At the same time, you don't even have to write a code from scratch. We have created a huge repository of code. In fact, my company had a hackathon with 1,000 people. It was the biggest in the world, where everyone wrote codes and prompts associated to it. So you can bring the 10x mythical productivity to life, right? I could write a prompt, give it a detailed prompt as to what I want, and the code gets generated, and then I start tweaking the code rather than writing it from scratch. So that's one aspect of it from a coding angle. The second aspect of it is definitely how people look at all these models, right? There is one aspect of using it as a chatbot everywhere, but I think the world is now evolving more into an agentic AI framework where autonomous decision making takes place, which will be for all the deterministic workflows. That means if I know that there is a process that's going to go from A to B to C to D, I don't need like a human intervention, like a complete human to look at it. Just a human in the loop can help. So I feel that any of the graduates or anyone who's entering the job market, if you're looking for a job which has a deterministic workflow, you should reevaluate it and look it into a more specialized domain of work where your ability to identify what is wrong and what is right can impact how AI is going to do the next possible step. But you won't need, for example, you might not need a mortgage advisor in future. You might not need someone who can tell you how to resolve credit card fraud on your own credit card. Like an agent can do, like an agentic AI framework could do all of that. But where did the fraud happen? What went wrong? How do you actually resolve it? Those are the key things that people would need to learn. So first principle thinking, I think that is where the key lies.
The operational use needs human in the loop. And when Nimish said agentic AI, the idea of decision making brings two areas straightforward. At Capital Technology University in Washington, D.C., where I'm the professor of and PhD dissertation chair for over 3 years, and there are 6 students who are doing PhD under me in the artificial intelligence and 4 in quantum computing. The only discussion that I do with them in our 15 minutes catch up every week is what is the ethical considerations you have looked into, how you are checking the algorithms for the responsible AI. If 2 Waymos collide, who's responsible for that? There's no human driver in that. That is where a human in the loop needed to look at the last collision. Who was the first to collide? Who was the second? Because police cannot make a call that whose fault it is. Algorithm is needed to be checked. So ethical AI, responsible AI, and obviously quantum computing is kicking in pretty neatly. We are conducting a survey at this moment on quantum error reduction and quantum sensing. That will be happening, I think, in 5 to 10 years time frame on top of these models that we are working on a 360 coverage and sort of a globule. So yeah, these are a few thoughts. There are areas where mathematics is needed, and if you are not doing it, trust me, you're losing the game right then and there. Back to you, Dean.
So I'm going to chime in for a second and maybe address how is this impacting the job market. At this point in time, are there mass layoffs? Is there mass change to who's doing what in the market? In some cases, what we're really seeing is the either entry level or let's say lower skilled roles, administration type roles. Those things are starting to go by the wayside, not at any great speed, but that's where we're hitting it first. And what does that mean for students? What does that really mean for anybody? Similar to back in the 90s when it was the first technology transformation, that was really about integrating technology into businesses. At that point in time, people didn't know, the general population didn't really know about technology. a lot of students coming out were going to these, purpose-built colleges to learn, to upskill, to be able to go into an organization either with skills to use technology, leverage technology, or people to, do development, deployment, things like that. It's really no different now. So kids coming through the education system are going to have a lot of skills that people who have been in it's not in the job market, in businesses for decades, that they just don't have. So anybody, either working today or coming into the market, needs to make sure that they have the skills to be that human in the loop, have the skills to be able to integrate this in their normal day-to-day. I'm assuming that in most higher organizations, or sorry, higher educational, even elementary school would be teaching these. If you don't have any understanding of how AI impacts or how to use AI to help yourself, then that's the place to start.
Good stuff. Great, thank you. So we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's I'm going to open it up for like maybe a 30-second conclusion from each of you, if that's okay. We'll start with Francis.
Sure. This was fun. I think my 30-second conclusion would be, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of people here who are in organizations today making decisions about AI and AI usage. I think the same, like DeepSeek or any other new model that comes out, there's new models coming out all the time. I think that the same principles hold true, which is you're going to need some proprietary data assets and some ground truth about your business or your customers or whoever, so that you can use that to use the intelligence to come up with unique and differentiated solutions. I think having deep domain expertise will serve you well as you integrate AI into your business. I do think that transformation is hard. And then the last piece that I think is, we didn't get a chance to touch on, but this idea of synthetic data and simulating, DeepSeek has shown us that you're capable of doing that now. So having large repositories of data may not, or large and broad swaths of data may not be as useful as potentially having very deep data, right? So this idea of T-shaped data, that way you can synthesize the rest. And so I think those are probably the things that if I'm in a big organization right now, those are probably things that I'm thinking about in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thanks. Nimesh.
Yeah, I think I'm going to actually double down on what Francis said. Embrace the innovation. There are ways to keep using these technologies, even though there are questions around it, in a more controlled environment using synthetic data. Go for it. Probably you might learn something about your business that you don't really know. Something, like probably how can you get a better output, or how can you improve tokenization, for example. So till you don't embrace the innovation within the organization in a controlled fashion, you're not going to hit that level of maturity that you would expect an organization to reach. And any one of us could be that proponent of change.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And Robin?
All right, so I'm going to go kind of the other way and say a lot of these gentlemen are more technical, more deeply into the use of AI and whatnot. Obviously, understanding the inner workings and how all of this change is affecting that. You don't need that. If that's the route you want to go, 100%. But there's this whole other world of technology and AI where you need to understand these things, but focusing on the strategy, which is really how can this help us drive our business. Francis has said a few times, how does this benefit our client? You don't need to be deeply technical. You don't need to go and do, your master's in advanced analytics to do that. I chose to do that, not because I ever thought I would be hands-on keyboard, building models. It was something that I wanted to do. Back in the late 90s, I wanted to be in that technical revolution. So after university, that's where I took my education. I've had jobs in technology, but I am, not a hardcore technologist, but I am a technology strategist. So you can be in part of this AI revolution. You can benefit from AI. You can benefit your company without getting too deep. Read, learn, find what interests you, and move forward that way.
Perfect. Thanks, Rob. And Dr. Adif, I started with you, so I'm going to finish with you.
Perfect. So I am not going to use any technology lingo in this. There is a very famous motivational speaker in the United States named Les Brown, and I'm going to read what he said. It is better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. I'm pretty adamant follower of Les Brown, Zig Ziglar, Tony Robbins, and all that jazz when I was doing my master's at Queen's, second master's. I learned that the technology would have its own pace. How can I be one step ahead? So the algorithm knowledge, in my opinion, is the key if you're going that route. If you're taking Robin's route, then that's the best route also, because you need two parallels. Human in the loop exists in both places. So if you're one of my students in 5 universities where I teach, I just tell them, if you don't know the basics, it doesn't matter you have an airplane, you can't fly it. So it's better to be prepared for an opportunity that does not exist at this moment. Thank you so much. It is wonderful. The panel was phenomenal. We should actually have that at Queens so I can come back home Kingston someday while living in DC or North Dakota. Back to you, Dean.
Yeah, DC is not so far. North Dakota, a little bit of a hike for sure. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. I think it was a tremendous discussion, so that was terrific. And it's always great to see Queen's alumnus or alumni doing great things. So again, thank you very much. And just a reminder to the audience, we wouldn't be here if we weren't trying to promote some of our programs. So Smith School of Business does offer a Master of Management in Artificial Intelligence and our Masters of Management and Analytics. And we also have a Master of Financial Innovation Technology if you're into FinTech. So feel free to do a quick search for me if you want and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to do that. And I can continue answering any questions. And if you have a question for one of our panelists that didn't get answered today, feel free to send it to me and I will forward that on and try to get you the answer. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. And wow, we're actually doing really well time-wise. That's always my biggest fear on this, but we're like about 10 seconds ahead of schedule. So awesome. Perfect. Again, thank you very much, everybody. And stay tuned. We're going to do this again because this was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.